The following program is a Town of Colony television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
Welcome to all of you to the first program of our 2019 and 2020 season. Hope you had a good summer and you're enjoying this gorgeous, gorgeous weather. I'm Bonnie Edelstein. I'm the director of Death with Dignity Albany. And this is Jeff Baltus, our deputy director. Wave. Thad Myrer, our tech guru. And various other volunteers. If you're new to our programs, Death with Dignity Albany is a nonprofit grassroots organization with a dual mission. We provide a forum for learning and talking about various end-of-life topics. And we also advocate for the passage of medical aid in dying legislation in New York. So we are a standalone independent organization, but we're also members of the New York Alliance for Medical Aid in Dying, along with our partner organizations, Compassion and Choices, and End of Life Choices New York, and Death with Dignity National Center. And we formed that alliance so that we could speak with one voice when it comes to advocacy and have more of an impact. So our first speaker today is Amanda Kavanagh, who is the campaign manager for Compassion and Choices and our liaison to Compassion and Choices. And Amanda will bring us up to date on what's going on the legislative and advocacy front.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's so great to be back and be here and see so many familiar faces. I was out for a few months on maternity leave with my little boy, and so I've been jumping back into things for the last few months, but it's great to be here today. This is my first program back. So although it seems like it's been a while, it also feels like I haven't really missed a beat. Things have kept on keeping on. Unlike a lot of our lawmakers here in New York, the campaign to pass medical aid in dying never experiences a dull moment. Our foot has been on the gas pedal from the beginning of the campaign, and things are not slowing down anytime soon. Our goal for the pending legislation is to have passage no later than 2021, although we're really hoping that 2020 is going to be the year for Empire State residents to have end-of-life options. For those who aren't familiar, the Medical Aid in Dying Act would allow a terminally ill patient, meaning someone with a prognosis of 6 months or less left to live, the option to ask their doctor for a prescription that would be self-administered to achieve a peaceful death. With 10 jurisdictions currently having a law in place, most recently New Jersey and Maine, we feel like momentum is on our side. Also on our side is Governor Cuomo, who's endorsed the legislation as important to pass publicly 4 times now. To reach our goal of passage in the upcoming year, the campaign has been really busy this summer. From tabling at events across the state, hosting in-district visits with lawmakers, preparing stories to share with lawmakers when the legislative session begins, and phone banking, we haven't stopped. All of these things have had different levels of impact and will continue throughout the coming months. Today, one of the things I'd like to discuss with you is phone banking. A few of our supporters in the audience know Bev and a few of her friends, as well as Nancy, have been helping us quite a bit with phone banking. And it's one of the most rewarding and impactful things that you can do, and it's a very relatively simple ask. I provide you with everything you need to be a successful phone banker. We have had volunteers from all over the country sign up to help us, and we've called into 15 different lawmakers' districts so far this summer, and I have another list of 15 ready to go. So if you are ever interested in phone banking, here's what we do. You let me know. I send out a detailed script and a list of phone numbers to contact. We start with a list of 25. If you want to do more, certainly let me know, and I can send you more names. we give you the phone numbers, and the phone numbers aren't just random phone numbers to call. They're people who have signed a petition with Compassion and Choices or have done some sort of advocacy to support us. And you call at your convenience, and you let them know that you're calling on behalf of Compassion and Choices and ask them to call their lawmaker. The script provides you with information on who their lawmaker is, why their support for the Medical Aid and Dying Act is important, and the information to call the lawmaker. For example, one of the main targets that we had throughout the summer was President of the Senate, Andrea Stewart-Cousins. And so we were able to get tons of calls into her district throughout the summer, so she consistently heard from us. Once you're done with the calls, you send me notes back, and that's it. There are certainly times where phone numbers are disconnected or busy, or you can't get a hold of someone, and that's totally fine. It really helps Compassionate Choices make sure that if phone numbers are no longer in service, we get them out, and that way the next time we do this, we have all the right information. Oftentimes when you're able to speak with supporters, they start sharing their story with you, and it becomes this very rewarding back and forth conversation. We've actually been able to identify a few new supporters and storytellers. Some folks from Buffalo that when we were at a Buffalo fair said, "Oh my gosh, a volunteer just called me and asked me to call Assemblymember Ryan. It's so great to actually see you guys here in person." So from Buffalo to Yonkers and everywhere in between, the phone banking has been extremely successful, and we're really hoping to continue to grow those efforts. One thing I just want to mention quickly is we had a table at Yonkers Riverfest two weekends ago, I think, and Senator Shelley Mayer, who just recently became a senator, she had long time been an assembly member, came over to our table and thanked us for phone banking, thanked us for being at Riverfest, and said that we were doing all of the right things to make sure that the Medical Aid and Dying Act was passed in 2020. And so there's never a one way to approach these things, from having in-district meetings, showing up in their district at different fairs and festivals, phone banking. There's all these layers of approaches that are happening, and we certainly can't do it without our volunteers' help. So I thank you all for being here. If you have any questions or you're interested in joining in on the phone banking or some other advocacy, certainly let me know, and I'd be happy to work with you on that.
So on to our speaker for today, Jane-Marie Schaeffer, Esquire. Joined the Herzog Law Firm in 2016. Jane-Marie focuses her practice in the areas of estate planning, elder law, special needs planning, estate administration, tax planning, and business planning. Jane-Marie has a rich background in estate and tax law from over 20 years of experience working at both law firms and CPA firms. And she received her law degree from St. John's University in Jamaica, New York. She is admitted to practice in both New York and Massachusetts. And Jane-Marie is the chair of the board of directors of Consumer Directed Choices in Albany, which is a nonprofit organization that promotes independence for individuals with disabilities. So we welcome Jane-Marie Schaeffer.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to have a presentation of about an hour. As we're going along, if there's something you don't understand and you have questions, feel free to ask me. If it's something that can wait to the end, I'm going to stick around to answer questions at the end. Okay. So today the topic that we're talking about is, as we age, where to live and how to pay for it. And as you see as we go through, most people want to live at home and not in an institution. And so we're going to talk about the legal and financial ways that you can plan ahead to make sure that you stay where you want to live as you age. So these are just some statistics. I mean, as most of you know, the baby boomers are getting old, right? There's about 10,000 people a day turning age 65 and older. And as more and more of us age, there's a greater need for long-term care. In fact, the lifetime probability of becoming disabled is 68% for people aged 65 and older. And I attribute that mainly to people living longer, the life expectancy is much longer, and as we live longer, there's more likelihood we're going to need help to stay at home and to take care of ourselves. And then just to throw a dollar amount out there, just to realize how big this field is, in 2016, the total spending for long-term care in the United States was $163 billion. And that's billion with a B. So there's a lot of money being spent on this area. So this is a strong statistic for why people want to stay at home. 87% of adults age 65 and older want to stay in their current home and community as they age. That's not a surprise. Sometimes I ask it the reverse way. How many people in here would like to go to a nursing home? No one has ever said, I want to end up in a nursing home, right? So what can we do to help seniors age in place? There's lots of different factors that go into this. It's not just legal and financial. There's some practical things. So one thing to start looking at is your home. Where do you live? Do you have a 2-story home? Are you going to have problems in the future getting up and down the stairs? Is there a bathroom on the first floor? Do you have a laundry in the basement, as many older homes do? So we look at what kinds of modifications could you make to your home so you can stay there as you age. Do you need ramps? Do you need handicap accessible bathrooms? Or is it not possible to stay where you are, and maybe do you need to move to a different home that would be more suitable as you age? Start to think about what kind of caregiving you could receive at home. So we ask you to start looking at your network of family and friends to see what kind of informal supports you could have that you could rely on. And then going out to looking at things that are in the community. Meals on Wheels is a very popular one. Most people know if you don't want to cook as you get older. Is there any types of free transportation to medical appointments? These are things that can keep you in your home longer and longer. And lastly, if you can't stay in your home, but there's a lot of in-between options before you have to go to a nursing home. So could you move to a senior living community, an apartment, or a condo that's less maintenance for you and that you could still stay in for quite a long time? Assisted living facilities are kind of a next level option when you need some assistance. So these are the things you want to think about as you're looking ahead to helping your loved one as they age. So we're going to spend a little time talking about estate planning documents, because without these documents in place, it's going to be very hard to put all this into effect. Because as you get older, you want to have designated people to take over matters for you and take care of things. So the first thing we're going to talk about is a power of attorney. Now, I usually like to ask at this point, how many people in here have a power of attorney? Okay. Majority, so very responsible. So I'll talk a little bit about it and some things you should know. So the power of attorney, as you may know, is a document that appoints someone to make legal and financial decisions for you when you're not able to anymore. If you don't have a power of attorney, so if you say, oh, I don't need one, I'll wait, right? And then sometimes you wait too long. And then maybe you've developed dementia or Alzheimer's, and now you can no longer sign a power of attorney. So that's leaving you with no one who could pay your bills for you or take care of your finances. And in that case, you have to go to court and have a guardian appointed. And that's a last resort. We don't want you to have to do that. The guardianship proceeding is very long and it's very costly. There's lots of lawyers involved in a guardianship proceeding. Even if your family gets along and they're all in agreement on who should be the guardian, it's a long, expensive process. On the other hand, I've seen many, many cases where children are fighting over who's going to be the guardian. So if you want to pick who's going to make your decisions for you, you pick while you still can, and you can sign your papers, rather than leaving it up to them to fight it out for you. So the power of attorney law changed in 2009 and 2010. So do people here have powers of attorney that are older? Some of you do? Okay. If you have an old one, it's still a valid power of attorney, but we just recommend that you look at it to see if there's any changes that you want. And you should look at all of your estate planning documents every couple of years to see what you want to change. For example, I find some people only name one person as their power of attorney. You know, they may just name their spouse because their children weren't old enough, right? And I have a case right now where the couple, they just named each other. And now the husband is getting too frail to be able to take care of things for the wife. And the wife has Alzheimer's, so she can't sign a new power of attorney. And they don't have any backups. So it's very important to have backups on your power of attorney. Because in that case where there are no backups, we actually have to go to court and ask to have a guardian appointed for her, for when her husband can't act for her anymore. So you should think about having at least one or two backups. You know, probably someone younger than you, it doesn't have to be. Power of attorney is also important when you look at, when you have one, look and see if you've signed the gifting rider on your power of attorney. The gifting rider is a separate part of the power of attorney that lets you make gifts of more than $500. So you may say, why do I care if they can make gifts, right? My children don't need to make gifts to themselves. The gifting power includes the power to gift money to a trust, because when you put money in a trust, that's considered a gift. And as you see as we go along, there may be a time where you may want to create a trust or add money to a trust to qualify for Medicaid. And if you have a power of attorney that doesn't have that full gifting power, your agent can't do that for you. So they're limited in what they can do. You should really give your power of attorney all the powers that you can. And if you don't really trust the person to have those full powers, then maybe you should think about why that person is your power of attorney, right? If you trust them enough to be your power of attorney, you should give them all the powers that they can have. So the question was, what happens if you want to revoke your power of attorney and name someone else? So when you sign a new power of attorney, there's language in there that says it automatically revokes all of your prior powers of attorneys. You should also give notice to the person who has the power of attorney, saying that I removed you. And if that power of attorney has been filed anywhere, if it's with a bank, for example, you should let them know that it's been revoked and that you've signed a new one. You know, the bank, if it has the old one, it's going to rely on the old one, and they're not going to be liable. You know, they can't go out and check for every customer to see if there's a new one. Okay. So next we're going to talk about healthcare proxies. So I'm just going to cover this a little bit. Basically, I know you probably have other sessions where you go into greater detail about your healthcare proxy. But in brief, a healthcare proxy is naming someone to make medical decisions for you when you're not able to. It also allows that person to access your medical records, talk to your doctors. And a healthcare proxy may or may not have a living will. It could be two separate documents, it could be one document. The living will is the part of the document that says what would you want to happen at end of life, you know. And it can be as general or as specific as you want. You could say, I would not want life support, but you could get detailed as to the different things that you would want done. In fact, I said I wasn't going to go into this, but there's something called a MOST form, Medical Order for Life-Sustaining Treatment. And that is like a living will, but it gets very detailed that you go over with your doctor as to which medications would you want nutrition, hydration, CPR. All of that's important. And the reason the living will is important to have that in writing and witnessed by two witnesses is that it gives your family member and your doctors knowledge of what you want done. And without that in writing, it's very hard to prove what you would want done. And doctors are going to err on the side of keeping you alive rather than removing life support. So having it in writing is very important. A healthcare proxy, I'm just going to mention, on the power of attorney, you can appoint one person, you can appoint two people to act together. You could 3 people to act together. I don't usually recommend that. On the healthcare proxy, you can only name one person at a time. Doctors and hospitals do not want to have to wait for 2 or 3 people to come to an agreement. So there's one person at a time who has the authority. Now that's not to say if you have multiple family members, they're not all going to talk together, and that one person is going to be the spokesperson, but it's one person at a time. And as with the power of attorney, it's really important to have backups on that document. Name more than one person to make decisions for you. So how many people in here have a healthcare proxy? Very good. Again, as with your power of attorney, you want to review it every couple of years, make sure the agents are still the agents that you want. Addresses and phone numbers, you may want to update those if people have moved around. You don't have to, it doesn't invalidate the document, but I like the healthcare proxy is important to have in an emergency. They're going to look at that and see who to call. So it's important to try and keep those up to date. Okay, so the first 2 documents we're talking about, the healthcare proxy and the power of attorney, are for when you are incapacitated and you can't make decisions anymore. Now, and then the last will and testament is saying what you want after your death, who's going to inherit your assets, who's going to be your executor. A lot of times there is fighting among the children. Well, mom picked you to be the executor, and that's not fair. I wanted to be the executor. Has anyone ever been an executor? It's not fun, right? It's not a privilege, right? It's actually a lot of work. So when I see kids doing that, I'm like, be lucky they didn't choose you. Your brother or sister has a lot of work to do. Most commonly, the executor is left with the task of cleaning out your house and selling it, and giving away all your different items. So your will is important because if you don't have a will, when you die, the money is going to go under something called the intestacy law. The intestacy law is a series of, relatives who would inherit it. So if you're married and you have children, that's who the money would go to. If not, it would go to your parents, and then your siblings, and then your nieces and nephews. So sometimes you hear people say, if I don't have a will, the state's going to get all my money. Well, that's really not true unless they can't find any relatives for you. So it's important to name that. Otherwise, some people who aren't married and don't have kids and they die, we have to search for relatives. And it can take time to really find. Sometimes it goes down to a second cousin that we're looking for. So if you know who you would want to get the money, it's better to say it in a will so that you're avoiding all that later on. Question is, if you name someone on your life insurance policy as a beneficiary, how does that work with your will? So your will only applies to things that don't have beneficiaries. So the beneficiary takes precedence. So a life insurance policy or a retirement plan, that's going to go right to the beneficiary. If you have a bank account that's in joint name, that's going to go right to the joint owner. The will usually ends up being only for assets that are in your name alone or that don't have beneficiaries on them. So a lot of times there isn't a lot of money or assets passing through the will. A lot of it is taken care of through beneficiaries. Yes, that's getting a little bit complicated, okay? But I'll just kind of give you a short answer. If you have a life estate with someone, both of you on the deed have to agree to whatever has to be done. But we could get into details, yes, afterwards. So the question is, what do you do about personal items, jewelry or furniture that you want to go to specific individuals? And there is 2 ways to handle this. So the way that you mentioned, where you can make your own list and sign it, that works 9 times out of 10, okay? It's not a legally binding document because it has to be in your will if you want it to be legally binding. So if you really wanted someone to follow your wishes, your will would have to say, for example, I leave my engagement ring to my daughter, right? But if it's in that list, again, most children are going to follow that list. I tell clients it's their ethical obligation, and they can choose whether or not to follow that. But if they do fight about it, then there isn't really anything requiring them to follow that list. Okay. So think about your own family and think about what would work for you. Yes. Can you have more than one executor? And you certainly can. If you're going to have two executors, there's two ways you can do it. You can require that they both act jointly on every decision, or you could name two executors and allow them to act separately. So, for example, the one could take over financial stuff that they're better with, and the other one can handle the personal property. So it kind of depends on how you think they would get along. But certainly you can have two. Okay. And you should also have a backup, again, as we mentioned, for your healthcare proxy and power of attorney, have an alternate. Okay. So you want to make sure you have all these legal documents in place. So as we're talking about how to plan for long-term care, I mean, you want to be able to do most of this yourself, but if you can't do this, your healthcare proxy, your power of attorney is going to step up and do this for you, but hopefully based on your wishes. So talking about helping seniors pay for long-term care, there's lots of questions that we start with to try and get you thinking about it. And the first one is, where do you want to live, right? And as we saw, most people want to stay at home, don't want to go to an institution. The next one is, who is going to provide your care? So how many people think that their children are going to take care of them as they get old? Good for you, yes. So there's many reasons why your children can't. Maybe they want to, you have a good relationship with them, but families don't live near each other anymore. Or your child has a job, your child has children, right? So they may not be able to be there all the time for you to take care of you. So you can't rely necessarily on your kids to take care of you as unpaid help, right? So if you have to pay for care, how are you going to pay for it? We'll talk about that. You need to look at what financial resources you have available. But what about your family? What resources can they provide? Sometimes families move in together, right? The parent moves into the child's house or vice versa to conserve, resources to help each other out. Are you a veteran? And I'll just mention this briefly. If you are a veteran, you and your spouse, and you served during a wartime period, there's a little technicality there, you're entitled to a benefit that helps you pay for long-term care, either at home or in an assisted living facility. They give you a certain dollar amount per month. So that is something to look into if you're a veteran and you meet those qualifications. So putting together a care plan isn't just legal and financial. It's also kind of based on what is that person's, needs and wishes. So, for example, we tell a lot of our clients, well, daycare is a good option. That there's adult daycare. You could bring your mom or dad there. They'd be watched during the day. But some people say, my dad's a loner. He's not going to talk to anyone. He never wants to go to daycare, right? So you kind of can't force people into a situation that they wouldn't want to be in normally. So if it's someone who doesn't want to go to daycare, maybe they'd be better with one-on-one, an aide coming into the house and watching them at the house, taking care of them. If the person is social, what other things can they do? Can they go to senior centers and groups like that to socialize? A lot of seniors do get kind of cut off if they're in their house and they can't drive anymore. It can be very isolating. So that's why moving to a community, an independent living community where there's a group of seniors living together and they have activities that you can go to. They can take you grocery shopping in the winter. Some people still drive, but they may not want to drive in the winter anymore. So you're kind of really thinking about how you live your life and what resources do you have to kind of put your plan together. And you need to think about this. This is going to determine how much you need to spend, where you want to live, how you're going to get your help. Again, looking at community supports and services, as we mentioned, there's the Meals on Wheels. There's people who would come in and pay your bills once a month. I see a lot of times when spouses come in and one of the spouses has passed, and it's not just the husband or the wife, but one person always paid the bills and one person didn't. And when they come in, they're like, I have no idea what we have. I don't know how to pay the bills. I never touched a checkbook. I'm keeping it neutral because I've seen it, both the husband and the wife come in with that. You can then hire a bookkeeper to come in and help them do that if they need to, if you can't do that yourself, right? So besides adult daycare programs, there's respite programs. Yes. Yes, so the aid and attendance benefit is what that is called. And they give you a dollar amount. Let's say it's somewhere between $1,000 to $1,800 per month. It's based on your income and your resources. So if they give you $1,500 a month and you're in an assisted living facility, that goes towards paying the assisted living.
But you said if you're at home,
yes.
Somebody to do those.
Yeah, so if you're at home, you can use your aid and attendance benefit to pay for home health aide to come in and take care of you. So it is, you can use it for either one. Okay. Along with developing a care plan, we're going to talk about some terms here that you'll see they're important later on. So activities of daily living. How many people have heard of that term? A lot of you have. Okay. So that's an ADL. So that term is used often to see, are you qualifying for long-term care insurance? Are you qualifying for Medicaid home care? And what these activities are, they're your pretty basic needs. It's bathing, it's dressing, eating, toileting, transferring. Transferring means getting up and down from a chair, and walking. And if you need assistance with 2 out of those 6 of ADLs, you're going to qualify for the long-term care insurance or the Medicaid benefits like that. There are other activities, they're called instrumental activities of daily living. They're IADLs. And those are more of, just household tasks, transportation, shopping, groceries, house cleaning. So you may need help with those also, but that isn't necessarily going to be covered by your long-term care insurance or Medicaid, so you may have to pay for that or get assistance for that separately. Community-based services. Luckily, we live in an area where there's a wide range of community resources that are available to you. And I always encourage everyone to look at them and take full use of them, right? And they're not necessarily going to replace, for example, what Medicaid does. They're just going to add to what that does for you and help you out. So, for example, just going through some of these home-delivered meals, not just Meals on Wheels, there's companies that will make food for you and deliver it to you. That's helpful if you have special nutritional needs, if you're diabetic or something like that. Nutritional counseling, friendly home visitation, someone just to check in on you and drop in and see that you're doing okay. Health insurance counseling. So this is important. It's for anyone who's on Medicare. As you know, you have open enrollment once a year where you can change your Medicare plan. Many people don't, once they pick their Medicare plan, they don't change it, right? But you can meet with a high cap counselor, and they can look at your doctors and your medications and see if you're on the best Medicare plan, and they may be able to switch you to a different one that's going to save you more money, because the different plans sometimes don't cover certain drugs or certain things that you need. And that's a free service, the high cap counselor that you should go to if you're on Medicare every fall. There's a home maintenance service. It's called Umbrella. It's through the Colony Senior Services, where they have a list of trusted people to come and provide maintenance to your home. So you're not just looking for your own person to, fix the refrigerator. These are people who you can trust to come in your house. There's the emergency response systems, medication dispensers, what else? Adult day services. Food pantries are a good way to get extra food. The caregiver. So if you are a caregiver for someone, there are caregiver support groups. I was just at an Alzheimer's support group this week speaking to them. Don't be afraid to seek that out if you are the caregiver, because you get burnt out. And as caregivers get burnt out, that's when we see people not able to stay at home anymore, that they need to go to a different place. So and it's usually the spouse who's the first caregiver. And the spouse is getting older, they have their own problems. They may not be able to take care of their husband or wife. So they need to make sure they're supported and they're getting as much help as they can. Yes?
What are food pantries?
Food pantries are just where there's, if you don't, they provide food if you don't have enough money to buy all the food that you need. So if you're on a limited income, you're spending most of your money on medications and health insurance, you can go get some extra food there for free. I have a client, a woman who has MS, and she has a very limited income. And her MS, the treatments or the medications are very expensive. So she only has maybe $100 to $200 for groceries each month. So she utilizes the food pantry to get fresh food to really help her every month. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about long-term care costs. Okay, so you know what to plan for. So home care. Home care can go from free to very expensive, right? Free home care is going to be your spouse, your children, your friends and family members. Paid home health aides. If you need to hire a home health aide through an agency, the average cost is $30 per hour. If you're going to hire someone not through an agency, someone off the books, you're probably going to see something more like half of that, $15 an hour. There's pros and cons to doing it through the agency and off the books. If you hire someone off the books and then they have an injury on the job, right? Because being a caregiver involves a lot of lifting. A lot of them have back injuries. And then they go to the doctor and say that they got injured on the job, they're going to put it down as a workers' comp claim. If you weren't paying workers' comp insurance for that person, now you have a whole lot of trouble coming up. There's also withholding taxes and things like that that an agency will do for you that you're not necessarily doing yourself. Assisted living costs. I don't know of an agency that ranks them. For example, I know nursing homes are ranked by Medicare. You can go online to see that. I don't know of a similar system for home health agencies. I would check with your local, Office of the Aging to see if they could give you that information. Mm-hmm. Yes. Agree. So the comment was that it's cheaper to use someone to handle the payroll for you than to go through a home health agency. And I definitely agree with that, because a home health agency is keeping a certain portion off the top for their costs, right? If you can find an accountant or a payroll company that will just handle the payroll for you, that's much cheaper, and then you can still hire your own person and have the payroll handled through an accountant. The only difference, and I'll say again, with hiring your own person, right, versus using an agency, in theory, if you have an agency and that person calls in sick that day, they should find you a replacement. It doesn't always work that way, right? But that is sometimes argued that that's a benefit of using an agency. I know, it doesn't always work. If you hire your own person, you need to have your backups if they can't come in. Okay. All right, so assisted living. Those costs, again, vary widely, starting at, you could see, as low as $3,000 a month, and they go as high as $8,000 per month. Now, you're starting off at your base cost, which is for your room and board, and then they're going to add on costs as you need additional medical help. Do you need someone to do your medications or injection? Well, no, not injections, but medications or things like that. They can add on those costs for you. There's dementia assisted livings. So they're a step below a nursing home. It's an assisted living, but it's usually a lockdown unit, so you can't wander or get out. Those are about $10,000 a month. That's what the memory care are. So now you're getting close to the cost of a nursing home. A nursing home is going to cost in the range of $12,000 to $15,000 per month. So thinking about that, even if you could pay privately for a few months, what if you stay in a nursing home is about 2-3 years? Yeah. Could you afford to pay for that long, or would you want to? So that's what you need to think about when you're looking at your finances. So I'm going to talk about funding sources for long-term care. Private pay is what I just said. You're going to pay out of pocket, as long as you can. Medicare, which has very limited benefits for long-term care. We'll go over what they are. There's almost none. Medicaid, which is the biggest payer for long-term care. That's what the majority of costs are paid for. Long-term care insurance, if you have that. There's some respite services that, like as I said before, that will give you a little bit of a break, but they're not long-term. And the veterans benefit that we talked about. Talk a little bit about long-term care insurance. Does anyone in here have a long-term care insurance policy? Well, a little bit more than normal, right? So a long-term care insurance policy is going to pay for your care. Remember we were talking about the activities of daily living, ADLs, before? So when you can't perform 2 out of 6 of your ADLs, or you have a cognitive impairment, so dementia or Alzheimer's, that's when your policy will start paying. And the policy is going to pay you a dollar amount per day. And when you purchased your policy, when you purchase it, you're going to select a dollar amount, and of course the premiums go up as the higher the dollar amount is. So you can either buy a policy that's going to fund 100% of your care in the nursing home, or it could fund half of your care because it's cheaper, and then you'd have to come up with the other half. Those are things to go over if you're looking at a policy. The other thing that affects the cost is how long the benefit period is. Most of them are 2 to 5 years because that's the average length of stay in a nursing home. But long-term care insurance policies aren't just for nursing homes. They provide money to you for home care and for assisted living. And that's a very nice benefit, and if you have one, you shouldn't hesitate to use it for those 2 benefits. There's different types of reimbursements. So if you're thinking about long-term care insurance, you need to meet with an insurance broker who sells them to go over the different options you have, to quote you what the different premiums are. A lot of people, they're not that popular because a lot of people think they can't afford the premiums, right? And also because premiums have been going up in years. There's been a lot of long-term care insurance companies that have gone out of business over the past couple of years. Now, when they go out of business, they don't just drop you, they switch you to another company so you don't lose your coverage. But they've sent out notices to people, we're raising your premium, if you want to keep your premium the same, you can drop some of these benefits. A policy, just to throw out a rough figure, if you're around 70 and you're in fairly good health, it could be about $3,000 to $4,000 a year for your policy. I've heard higher, I've heard lower. So part of it is based on your age, and part of it is based on your health. They look at your medical history. So with certain conditions, you may not even be able to get a policy. So if you are, I'm not saying they're good for everyone, but if you are going to get one, it's better to look at them while you're younger and just to see what the prices are and to see if that's what you would want to do. So the question is there a look-back period for long-term care as there is for Medicaid? And there's no look-back period. So if I bought a policy, today, this month, right, and I got sick next month, they would have to pay if I met all the qualifications. The only kind of delay you have is in the beginning. There's something called an elimination period. It's a waiting period. It's either 30, 60, or 90 days that you have to wait before your benefits would begin. So you don't have to wait if you do meet all the qualifications. But it did remind me of another point. There are some long-term care insurance policies. They're called the New York State Partnership Plan. And if you have one of those policies, it combines the benefits of long-term care insurance and Medicaid. So with those policies, when your benefit period runs out, let's say it was a 2-year period, and after 2 years you still need assistance, right? You automatically then become eligible for Medicaid if you have this certain type of policy, without regard to how much assets you have, which is really important because, as we see for Medicaid, you have to have assets below a certain dollar amount. So that is a good policy to have. Yes?
That's what I have. But
Okay.
the only dilemma is you have to stay in the state to use it.
You do, that's right.
I couldn't learn.
So the limitation to that is because it's the New York State partnership policy, you have to stay in New York to take advantage of the Medicaid in New York. So if you move to Florida, you can use the insurance benefits under there, but you'd have to move back to New York for the Medicaid. So if you're a snowbird, think about that. Okay. So Medicare doesn't really cover long-term care, chronic care conditions. Medicare mainly covers rehabilitation type services. So, of course, it covers hospital stays if you need to go in a hospital. If you're in a hospital and you need to go to a rehabilitation, Medicare will pay for up to 100 days in the rehab facility. To get that coverage, you have to have been in the hospital admitted for at least 3 days for that coverage to begin. There's some trick game, I'm not sure what you'd call it, that the hospitals are doing. When you go to the hospital, you're in the hospital, but you're not counted as admitted. You're only in there on observation status. And there's no way to really know unless you talk to the people at the hospital. And I found that out. I had to go in for a procedure. I was in overnight, but I was never admitted. You know, I had a room, I had a TV, I got dinner. You know, I consider that admitted. But that was only observation, so people don't necessarily know that. And if you don't have that qualifying 3-day stay, and then you go to a nursing home for rehab, Medicare won't pay for it. So if you're in that situation, that is something to try and advocate for. So Medicare will pay for the 100 days. They'll pay for the first 20 days in full. The next 80 days, you have a copay of $170.50 per day. Many of you have a Medicare supplement plan. Your Medicare supplement plan will pay for that copay for the 20 days 20 through 100. Now, don't get all your hopes up that you're going to get a full 100 days. While you're in the nursing home on rehab, at some point they're going to come and tell you you've plateaued, you're not progressing any further. And now Medicare is going to stop paying for you. You can still stay here, right? But now you have to pay us privately. So that happens to a lot of people. Don't think you have that time, that full 100 days while you're in there to get everything in order. You need to start planning the time you go in there to think about what you can do to help if you need to stay in there and help pay for it. Medicare also has similar coverage for rehabilitation at home. So if you go home rather than to a facility, they'll pay for some physical therapy, occupational therapy to come to your home, but that's usually over in a couple of weeks. So Medicare is not going to pay for your longer term care needs over time. It's a short term. So Medicare does have hospice coverage. So to qualify for hospice coverage under Medicare, you need to have a doctor certify that you have less than 6 months to live, and you have to agree that you are going to accept palliative care. And then once you and the doctors agree to that, Medicare will cover all of your hospice services, your doctor's visits, your nurse's visits, your medications. If they decide, if you're getting that in a nursing home, however, they won't pay for your room and board in a nursing home. So you're going to have to find another way to pay for that, either privately or through Medicaid. There are some times where they decide it's necessary for you to go in a nursing home short term, But if you're in there, it's generally not. And the one exception is the St. Peter's Hospice Inn. There's one floor at, I want to say the Villa Mary, but I think it's just called St. Peter's Rehab Nursing Home now. And they have a designated floor there where Medicare will pay for it. But if you're receiving those services in another nursing home, you still have to pay the daily room and board rate. Yeah. So, yeah, the comment is there are many doctors who are unwilling to say what your life expectancy is, right? Yes, so that is a hurdle you have to get around. They don't want to be tied down. It may be talking to not just your primary care, an oncologist, or whatever disease you have to try and get someone to certify that for you. Okay, so Medicaid. So Medicaid is the program that covers the majority of long-term care. If you're in a nursing home and you look around, 70% of the people who are in there are being paid for by Medicaid. So it's not like everyone who's in there is paying privately, right? And paying privately doesn't really get you into a different nursing home. That's another thing I've heard. Oh, if I go on Medicaid, I can't go to the good nursing homes. Now, every nursing home does take Medicaid. Another thing I'll hear is, well, you need money to get into a nursing home. That's not true. There are waiting lists at all the different nursing homes. Of course, you have to wait until there's a bed available for you. Having money doesn't necessarily push you up the list. Informally, you may hear that at some nursing homes. Having 6 months to a year of private pay puts you up the list, but they're not saying that out in the open, right? And I've had clients on Medicaid get into all the very good nursing homes in the area, so that doesn't stop you from getting into them. To qualify for Medicaid, you have to be 65 or over and again, be disabled. So we're going to kind of come back to that. Need help with your activities of daily living or your cognitive impairment. That's going to deem you eligible for Medicaid services. So what does Medicaid cover? There's two types of coverage. There's community Medicaid. And community Medicaid covers home care, it covers adult daycare services, it can cover assisted living services. In the Capital Region, there's only a handful of assisted living facilities that have Medicaid beds, so I just wouldn't count on that for assisted living. And then there's institutional Medicaid that pays for nursing home care. So what we're really going to focus on today is the community Medicaid, about how you can stay home and get Medicaid, because as we talked about, that's where most people want to be. Right? So to qualify for Medicaid, you have to meet the income and the resource levels. Okay. So if you're single, if you're an individual, the income limit is $879 per month. Now, I don't want you to say, oh, I have more money than that, I'm never going to qualify. Right? Those things you can do with your excess income. And the asset limit is $15,450. And we'll talk about what assets go into that calculation. If you're married, your spouse can keep their income. And your spouse can have up to $74,820 of assets. And again, we'll talk about what those are and what happens if you have too much. So when we're calculating the assets that you have, there's a lot of assets that are exempt. So first, your home is exempt. If you have a burial plot or a prepaid burial contract, that's where you go to a funeral home and prepay for your funeral. And then you put that money in an account at the funeral home. That money is exempt. Life insurance policy with a face value of up to $1,500. That's not going to be many policies, right? If you have a term insurance policy, that's exempt. If you have any other type of policy, a whole life or a universal that has a cash value, the cash value of that policy counts as an asset. Because Medicaid is looking at what you could liquidate, right? So you could cash that in and get that money to pay for your care. So they're going to count that. You're allowed to have a car, that's exempt. And this is a big one, your retirement plans are exempt. So retirement plans, your 401k or your 403b or your IRA accounts, those accounts are all exempt. So the balance in those accounts doesn't count towards that $15,000 limit. Yes? Pensions count as income. So they're not exempt, but I will show you what you can do with your income, right?
Are annuities included in there?
So the question is, are annuities included in there? Most annuities are what we call qualified annuities. If they're affiliated with a qualified retirement plan, those are going to be exempt, okay? Some people have something called a non-qualified annuity. That's an annuity that you purchased not with your retirement dollars, just as an investment. That's not exempt. That's just considered as if it's another investment.
What about charitable gift annuities?
Charitable gift annuities, are they exempt? They are not a qualified retirement plan, but that's where you're getting income in, so that's going to count as your income, right? So the retirement plans, to go back to this. So let's use an example. Let's say you have an IRA account that has $100,000 in it. That's not going to count, right, towards your $15,000. But as many of you know, when you reach age 70 and a half, you have to start taking minimum distributions from your IRA. So that's going to count as income. So if you have to take out, let's say $4,000 as your minimum distribution for the year, that counts as income and goes into the income calculation. Your IRA is not touched, and if you're on Medicaid, whatever is left in your IRA account is going to go to your beneficiaries upon your death. So that is protecting a large asset. The only difference, it's a small difference, is that required minimum distributions is one way of calculating. Medicaid uses a different way of calculating called the periodic payment. It's the same idea. They use your life expectancy, but they use a different table that's more favorable to them, right? So if you had to take out $4,000 as your minimum distribution, Medicaid may make you take out $8,000 as your minimum distribution. So you're taking out more income. But otherwise, in general, that account is exempt. So what happens if you have too many assets or too much income? So we'll talk about assets first. So you can transfer assets out of your name to your child, to your grandchildren. You can transfer assets to an irrevocable trust. You can transfer assets to your spouse. You can move assets around. So when you're married, remember the spouse who's getting Medicaid can only have $15,000 and the other spouse can have $74,000. So you're going to have to shuffle assets around to fit within those limits. There's something you can do that's called a spousal refusal. So if my husband needs Medicaid, I have $100,000, right? That's more than the 74. I can sign a spousal refusal and say I'm not giving it to him, right? I need the money to live on. I have to keep it. And then he would get Medicaid, but then the county who gives you Medicaid then decides whether to go after you for the excess money. And each county looks at each case and decides whether they're going to pursue that or not. So some people do spousal refusal knowing there's a risk of that lawsuit. Some people don't, and they choose to do one of the other things that we can do. Another thing you can do is to spend down your assets. Spending it means spending it on an item or a service that you need. So if you have a house, this is a time to go make repairs to your house, buy furniture, or buy a new car. Those are legitimate spend down expenses that you can do that gets you down to the limit that you need. The question is, how often do you have to requalify? And it's once a year. So generally you're going to be below that dollar amount, but if you've inherited money or got money, or, they're going to see that a year from now. You'll have to do something with that money. Now, income, if you have excess income, we calculate something called your Medicaid spend down amount. And I'll show you how we do that calculation. And you can preserve that spend down by putting it into a pooled supplemental needs trust, which is how people with more than $800 a month of income can qualify for Medicaid, is by using that trust. Okay. But first, we're going to talk about the assets. Well, if you have too many assets, and what can you do with them? So how many here are familiar with the 5-year rule, or have at least heard of it, right? So the common wisdom out there is if you transfer money, you have to do it 5 years before you need Medicaid. That only applies to nursing home Medicaid. That rule does not apply to community Medicaid. So if you set up a trust and you need home care in the next 5 years, if you need it this year, you can qualify for that, even though it hasn't been 5 years. So that's a huge difference between community Medicaid and nursing home Medicaid. So you can get eligible for it much quicker. Yeah, so if you have long-term care insurance, it depends on whether you have that partnership plan or not. So if you have that partnership plan, these rules don't apply to you, right? If you don't have that special partnership plan, then you're just like everyone else applying for Medicaid, and these rules would apply to you. Okay. So having no look back for the 5 years is really great, because let's say you set up a trust in the anticipation of trying to make it through the 5 years, and your health declines during that time, you can apply for home care at any time. We have people who come in and they're setting it up right now, and we do it a few months from now. We get them applied for community Medicaid just after they've set up a trust. So using a trust. So when I was talking before about having too many assets, and you can transfer them out of your name, you could transfer them directly to your children, or you could transfer them to a trust. So why is a trust better? If you transfer them to your children, right, and now it's in your child's name, it's open to all kinds of things, right? Your child could get divorced. Your child could be sued, right? Your child could get mad at you, right? Not give you the money back. So there's reasons for not just leaving it in your child's name. If you put that money in a trust, that money can't be touched during your lifetime. So that money is going to sit there, and it's going to be protected. Your child, we'll talk about, will be the trustee of that trust, but their divorce or their lawsuit isn't going to jeopardize the money that's sitting there. Because when you put money in a trust, you're giving it away, but you're not getting rid of it. You still want to have it there in case you need it to get it back to pay for your expenses. So setting up a trust is setting up kind of like setting up a corporation or an LLC, except it's much simpler. You sign paperwork, you pick someone to be the trustee, and that person is going to be in charge of the assets, and then the money gets moved to a different account for the trust, and now that money, it's still going to stay at the same bank or the same investment company. It's just under a different name, so now it's protected and it's not counted when you apply for Medicaid. So the question was, can you set up a trust and not fund it? Well, if you're trying to protect your assets for Medicaid, which is what we're talking about, you do have to put the money into the name of the trust. Otherwise, it's still in your name and it's not protected. I think what you were talking about, you can set up a trust that would only happen when you die, and it's a trust for your beneficiaries. So if you want the money to go to your children or grandchildren in trust, that type of trust doesn't happen until you're gone. Okay. Right. So let's talk a little bit about the rules for the trust, right? Okay. So the question is, can you use the money in the trust? So if you put money in the trust, the principal, which is the balance in there, you can't touch that. you can receive the interest and the dividends from that money. But most of our clients don't put money in the trust. I'd say 99% of our clients are putting their house in the trust, okay? So when you retitle your house into the trust, the deed goes into the name of the trust, right? But the trust says that you keep a life estate in the house. That gives you the right to live there for the rest of your life. You can't, your children, if they're the trustees, can't kick you out and sell it, right? So nothing changes in terms of the house. You still live there, and you have the rights to live there. If you want to sell your house and move into a smaller house, you can do that with a trust. Your trustee has to sign the paperwork to sell the house, but they could sell it and buy another house, all in the name of the trust, and it still stays protected. So having your house in the trust is really not much change to you in your day-to-day life. Okay. Putting money in a trust, you are going to feel some difference because it's money that you can't touch. So let's talk about that. So what do you want to put into your trust, right? Because you know that you can't touch this money. Okay, go ahead. So let's stop there. So can you put your retirement account in a trust? So you can't put your retirement account in a trust, okay? But that's okay because remember your retirement account is exempt for Medicaid, so it doesn't have to go into the trust. 5 years for the nursing home, but right away for the community Medicaid. So I think a lot of people should put their home in a trust. Some people don't like to because of the lack of control, right? That they're not the owner anymore. But when we talk through it, you realize that you're not really giving up much control because of that life estate that you have in the trust. You even keep all of your real estate tax exemptions. So you keep your star exemption, even though the house is owned by the trust. So it really is something that a lot of people should do to protect the home. So when you're looking at funding your trust, besides the house, what other assets should you put in there? And before you decide what to put in there, I ask people to sit down, look at what is your income, what are your monthly expenses, right? Are you drawing down from your savings and your investments every month to live on? So whatever you're using as your living expenses should not go into the trust because you can't use that money. If you have investments or savings accounts that you're not touching, that are really just accumulating, that's the type of thing you would want to put into the trust to protect it. So some people end up only putting their house in the trust, you know. Some people don't put in any money at first. You know, maybe they create the trust when they're 65 and you're just retired and you're going to do all these things you want to do, right? You're going to travel or different things to spend money. You don't have to just put money in at one time. You can add money to your trust later on. So a lot of these same clients come back when they're 75 or 80, and now they say, okay, now I have this money that I haven't really spent and I want to protect this. So now I'm going to add it to the trust. So at different points in your life, you may be able to put more money into the trust. Now, if you add money or other assets to the trust later on, that starts a new 5-year period. The question is, what if you have your home in a trust and then you decide you need to move into an apartment? So in that case, you would sell the house, right? And then the money from that sale would go into a trust bank account. That keeps that money protected. Now, the money can stay there if you don't need it, right? But if you need some of that money back to help pay the rent, you can remove money from a trust by a partial revocation of the trust. So that's a special way to get money out of the trust where you and all of your beneficiaries agree that you can revoke it, which means take out some money. So you do have access to the money that way if you need to do it. Yes. Yeah, the question was if you want to add other property to the trust, you can just add that. You can have it deeded right into the trust. So that's easy to do later on. Yeah. So once you've decided what to put into your trust, your trustee is now going to have to go out. If you're putting money or investments in, that's really between you and your trustee. You don't need the lawyer at that point. The lawyer's already set up the trust. You could go open a bank account and add money to the trust anytime you want to. Now, it doesn't work the other way around. If you want to revoke the trust and take some money out, you do need to have that paperwork done to go back to the lawyer to revoke it and take out the money. People make mistakes about this all the time, right? By putting money in, taking money out of the trust. You want to follow the rules here, because if you don't do it right, Medicaid can say, this is not a valid trust, right? And now we're going to count this money. But if you follow everything that you're supposed to do, then the assets are going to be exempt. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about community Medicaid, right? So this is Medicaid where you receive care at home. There's lots of different programs under that name, community Medicaid. And I'll explain some of them here, but when you are at that point where you need to decide what to do, it's helpful to talk about this with someone who knows the Medicaid programs, a social worker, etc. So there's programs they're called waiver programs. First one's called the Nursing Home Transition Diversion Program. What that program is meant to be, it's for people who would otherwise be eligible to be in a nursing home, but this program provides the funding to keep them at home instead. So it provides lots of services to you in addition to the home health aides. And sometimes all of these programs, you're going to be evaluated and see how many hours of care you need per day. So sometimes you may be able to get more hours with one program than another. There's a traumatic brain injury program for people with that. All the other programs, if they're not a waiver, they're run by managed long-term care companies. So the Medicaid program used to be managed at the county level, your local Department of Social Services. And that is still where you apply and get approved financially. After you get approved financially, then they farm it out, right, to an insurance company. So you go join an insurance company and they pay for all the home care that you need. So there's two types of programs. Basically, there's personal assistance and consumer directed. So the personal care assistance, that's where you're getting your aids through a home health agency, okay? Someone evaluates you, they say you need 40 hours a week of care, then you pick an agency to use, and then you're relying on them to staff the hours for you. The other program that a lot of people like is called the Consumer Directed Program. Same idea, you get approved for 40 hours a week, but as we were talking before with private pay, now you go out and find your own people to work for you, and Medicaid pays them. So if you find your neighbor who can take care of you, you certify the hours where they work for you every week, and that gets paid through a Medicaid agency. So some people like that better because they're picking who works for them. Some people choose the agency because that's easier for them. Under the consumer-directed program, you can even have family members work for you. So you could pay children and grandchildren, nieces, nephews to work for you under that program. Yes. So now if you're going through the Medicaid program, they are going to automatically do withholding taxes, workers' comp, all of that. They take care of that. It's only when you're paying privately that you want to make sure that's taken care of. Yeah. So consumer-directed, they pay a Medicaid level, and when you join or sign up with this agency, they're going to give you the rates that they will pay. Now, those rates are generally in the $10 to $12 per hour range. Some may go up to 14, but that, so on the low side because it's Medicaid funded. Yes. Question is, for long-term care insurance, your home health aide may have to have certain certifications. Under the consumer-directed program, no, you do not have to be certified at all. The only thing you have to do is pass a health screening. They do a TB test, and then you're good to go. So you don't have to be certified. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to talk about is what happens if you have too much income. How do you qualify for Medicaid? So there's excess income is called a spend down amount, right? If you make more than $879 a month, you have excess income. So Medicaid gives you 3 choices of what to do with that excess income. Really only one of them is going to be advantageous to you. So the first one is you could send your excess income to Medicaid each month, and then they'll provide you the services. So it's like paying for it, right? The second option is if you have qualified medical expenses that aren't covered by insurance, the spend down can be used to pay those medical expenses. So that may happen sometimes. But the last one is you can deposit your excess income into a pooled supplemental needs trust each month, and you don't lose that money. Once that money is in the trust, now you can use that money to pay your monthly household bills. So you have to divert it through a trust, but you still have full use of all of your income to pay your bills. So here's an example. In this example, Norma makes $18.79 per month of income. Right? She's allowed to keep $879 per month, so she has a $1,000 spend down. So each month she's going to send $1,000 to the pooled trust. And now she has $1,000 in that trust that she can spend on anything that she needs. So these are some of the things she can spend the money on. If she is living in an apartment, she could pay the rent. She's living at home, she can pay her mortgage, her taxes, her utilities. She can pay for groceries, she can pay for phone and cable, transportation. Anything that she would normally spend that money on, she can spend the money on. So the pooled supplemental needs trusts, they're run by different nonprofit agencies. There's about 20 to 30 of them around the state. The one that's most commonly used in our area is called the NYSARC Pooled Trust. NYSARC, that's NYSARC. So they're a large nonprofit. They manage hundreds, if not thousands, of these trusts for people with disabilities and elderly people who have spend downs for Medicaid. So they are very easy to work with. You send them the spend down, you send them the bills that need to be paid every month with your money. Yeah, so she sends them $1,000, okay, and they pay her bills out of that $1,000. So Norma has $879 that she keeps in her own checking account. So it's like having 2 accounts. Then she has $1,000 in this trust account. So she can pay her bills from either account. So she would want to pay it, from the trust first, and then the $800 is left over.
I assume there's an upper limit on how much you can put in the pooled trust.
There's no upper limit on how much you can put in the pooled trust. But as a practical matter, any money that you don't spend out of the pooled trust stays with the nonprofit when you die. Okay? But it's not that hard to come up with bills to pay every month, right? I'm sure you can come up with $1,000 worth of bills, right? Yes. NYSARC or any pool trust charges fees. There's a fee to join it, which is about $200-300. And then they charge you a monthly fee that's based on how large your deposit is every month. It could be $30, $40, something like that. So yes, there is a fee to doing that, but you are keeping full use of your income every month, so that's the benefit. Yes?
Do they also have a transaction fee? You're asking them to pay all
I think that's built, I don't think they have a separate transaction fee. That was the question. I think it's built into that monthly fee. Okay. Or they may allow you up to 10 transactions under that fee. Right. All right, so these are the different ways you can get money out of the trust. So you could send them your utility bill, your rent bill to pay. For other purchases, it's probably easier to make the purchases on a credit card and then send them the credit card bill and they'll pay the credit card bill. The only thing they're looking at is to see that the money is spent on you, okay? Because it's your income. So you can't be using it to support another family member. They won't pay for cigarettes or alcohol, sorry. That has to come out of your own money. And they also don't pay for pets, unfortunately. I had a client who was very upset that they wouldn't pay her vet bill. Yeah. But in general, they're going to pay almost anything that you need. Okay. So I can take more questions at the end, but before we move on, I just wanted to point out that we have at our law firm a social worker who works for us. Her name is Kim Hance. So she handles some of the parts of this home care planning that we don't do as lawyers. We're going to help you get qualified for the programs legally and financially. She's going to help you more with the, finding a home health care worker. How many hours of care am I going to get? What's a good senior living or assisted living to move into? And that's important, to have on your side. If you're in a hospital and there are social workers there who will help you with discharge planning, their goal is to get you out as quickly as possible, right? So having your own social worker who's going to advocate for you can be really helpful when you're trying to figure out what to do. Sometimes we have her even go talk to people to make the decision whether you can stay home or whether you need to go to a facility, to kind of talk you through that and see whether it's possible. So that's a service. She's not the only one. There are private, they're called geriatric care managers in the community that you can find to do this service for you. All right, thank you. I'll be up here afterwards if you want to have questions, but I'll just turn this out now.
Thank you, Jane-Marie. I really appreciate all the effort you put into planning this presentation. It was right on target for what we needed to learn about. Thanks for being here.